Good morning, everybody. This is Sally Glick. I'm here at Sobel & Company, and I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today. We often kind of ignore the fact that technology enables us to take these calls from anywhere, and we are spoiled by having so many people who join us in person here at Sobel & Company and have lunch with us and participate live. So today, due to the weather, we're actually taking advantage of technology, and we welcome Tracy Blank to this webinar. And so she's not here today at Sobel. She's able to join us remotely as well. I actually heard Tracy speaking about the power for nonprofits that is in managing stress and in mindfulness and in the ability, when you're sitting on those front lines and working in such stressful situations, to actually be able to manage that in an effective way and do your job as leaders in the nonprofit community. So Tracy, I'm really excited to hear you again and thrilled that you've agreed to do this for us. And I am going to turn it over to you on behalf of Sobel & Company and encourage everybody, if you have a question, feel free to put that in the chat box, and Tracy will do her best to get to them before, or at the end, if you have a question at the end, we'll make some time for that as well. So Tracy, it's all yours. Help us manage our stress, including the stress of deciding whether or not we should have a webinar when it's snowing and icing outside. So we started our day with some stress. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. So I am a medical support clinical hypnotherapist. So what that means is I help people use the power of their mind to achieve their goals. And I specialize in anxiety and medical support. So stress goes hand in hand a lot with anxiety. So I definitely help people all the time with managing their stress. And I come from a background in social work, and I worked for nonprofits as well as for the state, and that's kind of nonprofit-ish too. So I have a background in what you guys are experiencing as well. And I think that's really helped to put me in a position to help people even further because of that. So as we go through, feel free to jump in with your questions. I'll try to look for them on chat. And also there'll be time for the questions at the end. So let me make sure. Okay. So how does the mind actually work? So knowing how your mind works can help you then to put that into practice to work for you. So hypnotherapy is knowing how the mind works and utilizing that knowledge to take control of your mind and achieve your goals. Hypnotherapy seems to be this big mystery to a lot of people. People think about it as like something that happens in an entertainment show, like on a cruise ship, or for weight loss or smoking. But it's a natural state that you go into when you're driving home a way that you've gone a ton of times before, and you kind of zone out and all of a sudden you're home. That's the same process as hypnotherapy. Your subconscious mind is in control, and your conscious mind is not really paying attention. But you're not unconscious, you're not asleep. So there's this misconception that you don't know what's happening during hypnosis. That's not true. It's that your subconscious is in control. And just as in that example, let's say the radio is playing along. Later, you might hear a song that was playing on the radio then and know the words, because those suggestions of the lyrics implanted themselves in your subconscious mind. So that's just kind of how the mind works. So let's get a little bit further into that. So there's two main parts of the mind. There's the conscious mind. That's the running monologue in our head that we're aware of throughout the day. So it has our analysis, our reasoning, our will or volition when you're trying to just grit your teeth and get through something. Your five senses are usually in the conscious mind because you're aware of what they are, kind of everything you're aware of at any given time. The subconscious holds everything else. So the subconscious has all the automatic functions of your body, your circulatory system, respiratory system, digestive system, reproductive system. And that's mainly overall called the autonomic nervous system. Okay, so I'm just saying I need to start. Okay, I thought I started the slideshow. Let me just make sure that it's sharing. I apologize. And let me just make sure these slides are sharing correctly. Sharing, show, okay. Oh, looks like I paused. Show my screen.
There you go, that worked.
Okay. Thank you, I apologize for before. Thank you for telling me I need to shut it. So you didn't miss anything though. The slide before this was just the title, and now I'm explaining the main part. So we're good. So the subconscious is everything else. So we kind of talk through the automatic functions of your body, and this is overall known as the autonomic nervous system. So the autonomic nervous system has two different states. There's your fight or flight response, and then there's the restorative. Now, we're supposed to spend most of our lives, like 90% of our lives, in that restorative phase, and only like 2 to 5% the rest of the time. 95 and 5%. So we're supposed to spend the 5% in the fight or flight, but in this society, we tend to spend the opposite, 95% in that fight or flight. And that causes a lot of issues as well for all the functions of the body, because when we're in that fight or flight, the respiratory system, the digestive system, the reproductive system, the immune system are not getting the blood and attention it needs, because the only parts of our body that are getting that is what we need to either fight or flee from danger. So that's one issue that we can talk about a little bit more. But also part of the subconscious is your memories. So you're not aware of every memory you have, but you do have them, and you do have the memories of them. They're in the subconscious mind. Your imagination. So when you create something, or in dreams, imagination comes out a lot, that's all in the subconscious mind. Your emotions are a very important part of this. So a lot of times we become aware of what emotion we might be having: anger, anxiety, happiness, excitement. But a lot of times people are unaware of exactly what emotion they're having, and they have to spend some time thinking about it and identifying what that emotion is. And also our programming. So our programming is what's going to become very important when we start talking about this a little bit later. But your programming are beliefs that you have about the world and how you see the world. So in between the conscious and subconscious is the critical factor. And that's our filtering system for how we see the world. And it goes both ways. So this next slide is just going to give you kind of what I just talked through. So you have your conscious mind that we talked about, the running monologue in your head. The subconscious is everything else. You can see that's the much bigger part here. And then the critical factor in between. And the critical factor filters how we see the world. And the most important part of this is the mind does not let us be wrong. So if we have a belief in the subconscious, that is going to play out with how we see the world. So let's talk through that critical factor. So the critical factor develops between the ages of 7 and 11. And after this time, whenever a new thought comes in, the critical factor checks the subconscious to see if this is true. Now, this is true, meaning does it fit with what we already hold to be true? So that's a very subjective truth. If it does fit with what we hold to be true, then the critical factor lets this in to reinforce those beliefs. If it doesn't fit, it kicks it back to the conscious mind for more analysis. So if you have the belief that the world is an unsafe place, let's say, when you see examples of people helping one another or rescuing people, you'll say that's nice, but the critical factor won't necessarily let that in to the subconscious mind to change that programming, because it doesn't fit with what we already hold to be true. And in fact, that critical factor will project that onto different situations as well. So it works both ways. So both it's our bouncer, kind of letting in only things that fit with what we already hold to be true. And then it also projects our beliefs onto the situations of our lives. So there's 3 main ways that this happens. And you'll notice it most commonly in once you decide kind of like on a car that you want to buy, you see that car everywhere. That's your critical factor looking for what you're telling it to look for. So this happens with our beliefs too. It projects onto situations, so we make assumptions about what's playing out in front of us based on our beliefs. We attract people and situations into our lives that match our beliefs, or that act in a way that matches our beliefs. And then the third way is it pipelines emotions. So you'll notice when you're with a really happy person, you feel happy. It goes the other way too. If you're in the room with a very angry person, you might start to feel some anger. So this is creating the environment that also reflects our beliefs, because you're projecting onto others and they're projecting it back onto you. So that makes sense so far? I don't see any questions coming up in the chat, so I'm guessing everybody is understanding. And if you're saving your questions for the end, that's fine too, just checking in. Okay, so then where do our beliefs come from in the first place? So these beliefs that have been in our subconscious, some have been there since between the ages of 7 and 11 when the critical factor formed. But of course, there's things that come in besides this. So there's 5 ways to get past the critical factor once it's formed. Does anyone want to put into chat what they think some of these ways might be? No? So the first way that our beliefs our beliefs or program are held in the subconscious mind. We talked about that. Let me just go through here. Pull this all up. All right, so the 5 ways I was just talking about is authority figures. So your parents, your teachers, TV can be a big way that authority figures, politicians, anyone that you consider authority figure. This also comes into play a lot with doctors and bosses. What they reflect onto you, you'll take to be true, more so than if they came from, especially a stranger on the street, but other ways too. So that bypasses the critical factor. The second way is peer groups. You see this a lot with peer pressure. If your peer groups have a certain belief, that will pass through the critical factor and solidify itself as a belief as well. The third one is emotional situations. So you'll find this when somebody's going through a really difficult time, either with themselves or a loved one being ill. Also in times of big attacks or big world events, emotional situations, you find a lot of people altering their whole belief system. Fourth way is repetition. And this is where your positive affirmations come through and really help. This also comes through as the common cliche is that if you hear it enough, you'll start to believe it's true, usually on the negative end. If somebody tells you you're not smart enough times, you'll believe that's true. But it also works with a positive. If someone tells you you're a loving person, that you're kind and caring and a great person and intelligent, creative, and all that enough, you'll believe that as well. And then the fifth way is altered state. So in the altered state of hypnosis, we open that critical factor to access the subconscious and change those beliefs. And we'll get a little bit more into that in a second. The other altered state, meditation, is a similar state to hypnosis. It just has a different goal. So with meditation, you're usually going into the subconscious to kind of clear it out or to shift your body from that fight or flight response to that restorative to help your body access all the immune boosting things that come from that. There's other goals of meditation, but that's really the main goal. With hypnosis, you go into this state in order to achieve a goal of some type, changing your behavior, changing your programming, shifting some things around. So a lot of people that have a hard time with going into meditation find it easier to go into hypnosis because there's always something to do. And a lot of people with anxiety especially, or just in general in this society, tend to be doing people. They like to do a lot of things and, you know, to keep busy. So hypnosis kind of achieves that goal and therefore it's easier for them. So going back up to what I had before these 5 ways, the results model. So this is how some of these more really crucial kind of beliefs come from and how we start to change them. So there's different events that happen in our lives, and sometimes they're traumatic events, sometimes they're just events that are sensitive to us and we don't even realize at the time. But there's an event that happens that creates a belief and that causes emotion, thoughts, behaviors, and results. So let me give you an example. Very common one is that a lot of people have a fear of public speaking. And a lot of times this comes from an event in childhood, usually when they're first starting school, preschool, kindergarten. The teacher asks them to come up to the front of the room and write something on the board. So let's say they had spelled cat and they spelled it K-A-T. And everybody in the class started laughing at them. From that, they might form the belief that in front of groups, they're stupid or they look stupid. They don't know what they're talking about, etc. So now this emotion that comes out of that is anxiety and nervousness in front of groups. And the thoughts that accompany it are what we kind of just talked about. They come out of the beliefs. oh, I can't speak in front of groups. I won't know what to say. I won't know what to do. I'll look like an idiot. Everybody will think I'm a fraud. I don't deserve to be here, whatever that might be. And as a result, they avoid those situations. And because we talked about the mind doesn't let you be wrong, now their behaviors are fitting into that. So in front of groups, their mind goes blank. Maybe they'll start sweating. Their heart might start racing. All these things that lead them to reinforce that belief that in front of groups, they don't know what they're talking about. And that gets them certain results in life. So maybe they avoid situations, they don't go for jobs that would require speaking in front of groups, etc. So you can start to change things any step of the way, and you'll see people start to be aware of these things when they want to change the results. So maybe they'll start to try to change their behaviors. They'll try to take some deep breaths to slow down their heart. They'll start to, make more things. Oh, there are questions under the questions tab. Okay, let me just talk through this and then I'll check those questions. So they're going to take different behaviors. They could also start to change their thoughts. So there's a lot of different therapies out there on changing your thoughts, being aware of what your thoughts are, and then putting in the thoughts that are going to help you to change that in the moment. So if you think I'm dumb in front of groups, change to I'm smart in front of groups, and reinforcing those more positive ones. Emotionally, you can bring in different emotions, feeling positive, feeling confident. But with hypnosis and with what I do, it's important to get back to the belief, the programming. Because remember, your mind doesn't let you be wrong. So even if you're starting to change these things, they're just going to be changed in the moment, the emotions, thoughts, behaviors, results. But if you get back to changing the beliefs that live in subconscious mind, then moving forward, it will permanently change. So let me find these questions that people have. Okay, so when you are in the moment and paying attention, for example, to the colors of the sunset sitting on the back porch, is that when you are in the conscious mindset? And if you are not aware of the changing colors of sunset, but rather thinking about your workday or something else, is that when your subconscious mind is coming out? So you have, this is John Carno. So John, you have this right just in reverse. So when you're not aware of the changing colors and kind of you're just enjoying the moment, you're being very present, there's not any distracting thoughts coming in or anything about your day, that's the subconscious mind, okay? And then when that stuff is coming out, that monologue kind of we were talking about, that's the conscious mind. So you're right, just in reverse. So I hope that helped, but I'll type it here to just reverse that, and you got it. Okay. Send. Okay, second question, also by John. Thank you, John, for joining in. If stress is attacking my self-esteem and lessening my positive feelings about myself, does the mind look at the critical factor and subconscious to see if the feelings are rational? So the subconscious mind doesn't have rationale. Rational thought is in the conscious mind. So that's why we're not always aware of the beliefs, or we might rationalize why we have them, and that would be the conscious mind. And it's not always the real issue that's bothering us. In the subconscious is where we can get to the root of that. And when I do, there's two different kinds of hypnosis: suggestion therapy, which is where we're putting in positive suggestions, and then analytical. Analytical is more where we're asking the subconscious directly what's going on. And this is really beneficial so we can get to the root of why this is actually happening so we can change it directly and address it. So the mind doesn't necessarily know to look there. It's just following the programming. I hope that answered your question. So again, if stress is attacking your self-esteem and lessening your positive beliefs, it probably has something to do with a programming there, that stress is making you feel a certain way because that programming might already exist, or else because maybe it's an emotional situation, or maybe it's that repetition we were talking about, a constant stress that's braiding you. Now that programming is changing in your subconscious and therefore projecting it onto the situation, saying, because of this, now I don't feel good about myself. I hope that kind of answered your question as well. All right, so let me pull that out. Okay, so getting back on track here. Does anyone else have any questions? Those were great questions, John. Okay, so getting back into this. So now knowing this, how can we start to change the program? So these are things that you guys can start putting into practice now, or with the populations you work with, if this is something that you're able to work on your populations with. But really, as we know in nonprofit, a lot of times we're taking care of other people and we need to take care of ourselves. So these are very quick, easy ways that you can start to change those things. So I talked about earlier when I talked about the 5 ways that things get past our critical factor. One of them was repetition. So we can, just as John kind of talked about, repetition can be stress attacking, and that repetition of an event can cause our self-esteem to lower. We can repeat affirmations or positive reversals to kind of raise our self-esteem as well, or other things. So being aware of exactly what your belief is and then reversing that directly. So a lot of times people put in positive affirmations that they'd like to add, and that's great. That's not going to be hurtful at all. However, repetition of something that maybe you don't believe is true, but you'd like to, and is more of an exact reversal, is going to better change that programming. So for instance, a very common one that I see a lot self-esteem wise is I'm not good enough. This applies to so many things. I'm not good enough at my job. I'm not good enough in my personal life. I'm not good enough to accomplish this or that or other goals. So the exact reversal of that would be I am good enough. So repeating that, I am good enough, things like that. A fear of a certain situation, instead of rationalizing to yourself why it's okay to walk into that situation, instead just keep it simple. I am confident in that situation. I am safe in that situation, whatever the exact reversal of that would be. So I know I'm being a little vague, but if anybody feels comfortable telling me in either the questions or the chat what they might want to reverse, I can use that as an example. Otherwise, that's fine. We can talk about it later. You can always email me too if you have any questions about that. When you're using positive affirmations or reversals, the important thing is using first person. So a lot of people will talk to themselves in the second person. Oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, you're okay. We're distancing ourselves with that languaging. So using first person claims ownership of what you're saying. You also want to use present tense. So the mind can't decipher between what's happening tomorrow or yesterday. Everything just is to our mind. So you want to use present tense, because saying I will do this, the mind doesn't know when will is. So say I am. If you feel like you need a little bit of like a step, you can say every day more and more I am. So every day more and more I am confident. Every day more and more I am comfortable in all situations. Things like that. So first person, oh, here we go, reversal. Here's a question. Reverse the feeling that you made a wrong decision. So this is a great one. So a lot of times people get very caught up and almost stuck in the thought that they made a wrong decision. And we can rationalize, oh, it's not worth even thinking about that. I can't go backwards. So a very simple reversal is I'm confident in my choices. Or even I made the right decision. Or because I am confident in my choices, I know I made the right decision. So you can link them together. I hope that helped. So getting back to affirmations, you want to do first person, present tense, and positive languaging. Now this one gets a little tricky because we very commonly talk in the negative. I don't want to worry. I don't want to, go do that. Instead, you want to say what you do want. So a way to think about this is that the mind speaks in pictures. So think about, as you're saying it, what picture comes to mind. So the one I always like to give as an example is, I don't want to eat ice cream in bed. What image comes to your mind? Usually it's someone eating ice cream in bed. So instead, you want to change that to what you do want. So I want to go to bed satisfied, or I go to bed satisfied. We don't want to put in the want. So first person, present tense, what we do want, languaging wise. Okay, so getting to the next one here, the next thing that you can start to utilize is awareness of what your beliefs are. So this can get a little tricky because it is in the subconscious mind, but there are a lot of people who are able to get to the root of the beliefs. And a lot of times if you're not doing hypnosis, because that's another way you can access the beliefs, you get a feeling about what it is because you're getting certain behaviors, certain emotions, certain thoughts out of similar situations, and that can hit on what that belief is. So awareness of what that belief is and how it's influencing the other things that come after in that results model, the emotions, thoughts, behaviors, and results. Awareness of what it is can be the first step to changing it. Whether you're reversing it with repetition or just now being aware and you make that decision, start to change it in other ways. Hypnotherapy, as I talked about, is a very common way to do it. At least my clients use it that way. So suggestion therapy is putting into the subconscious mind new programming. So just as we talked about the positive reversals, we're just implanting those into the subconscious mind. Analyticals, where we're asking the subconscious mind directly through different ways, whether direct programming, asking it to give us symbols, regressions back to the event that caused that belief, etc. What's going on so that we can change it. And I see another question here from Edda. When the time is right, can you give an easy definition for mindfulness? It totally confuses me. Well, Edda, you asked that at a perfect time because the next thing, as you can see on this slide, is mindfulness meditation and other subconscious states. So as I talked about, meditation and hypnosis are the same mind state, going into the subconscious mind. Another subconscious mind state is deep prayer. So some people who are very into prayer can feel themselves go into that subconscious mind state as well. Regardless of what you're using the subconscious mind state for, it's all getting into that subconscious mind. So mindfulness is a type of meditation that was developed. So meditation, a lot of times, I'm not an expert in meditation, but it does coincide with my work. So, if somebody else knows more about meditation, that's fine too. Please feel free to put your statement in here and we can share that as well. But my understanding and what I usually talk to people about it and I've heard people say is meditation is really clearing the mind, going into that subconscious mind state with the intention of clearing the mind. And that can be very difficult for people because we're used to constantly thinking. So mindfulness takes that to a state where we're not just sitting there clearing the mind and shutting out what's around us. Instead, we're being very mindful or aware of what is around us. So a perfect mindfulness exercise that I actually share with a lot of my clients is something called a grounding exercise. And I think I have that on the next slide, but I'm going to talk through it here anyway because it's relevant. So if we come to it again later, that's why I switched up a little bit. So mindfulness is being very aware of what's around us. And this grounding exercise is a great example of that. What do I see right now? So I'm looking at this computer screen. I also have a lamp here. I have my water bottle. I have a pen. What do I see? Just being very aware of what's in front of me. What do I hear right now? Well, I hear the rain outside. I hear some cars going by on the street. I hear kind of a white noise silence. What do I smell right now? I smell of fresh air. Not much else because I'm in a room. But if the window was open, maybe I'd smell the rain outside or snow, whatever it is going on outside. Things like that. So what do I feel right now? Well, I feel the desk because I'm touching the desk right in front of me. I feel the fabric of my sweater on my hands as well. I can feel my hair hitting my face. What do I taste right now? I taste a mint because I was sucking on one before, so I still have a little bit of that aftertaste. So just by doing that, going through my 5 senses, I really grounded myself in this moment. So that's an example of mindfulness, but there's a lot of them. So I know people who do mindfulness exercises when they eat, being very aware of what they're eating. This lettuce is crunchy and crispy, and I can feel it as it's going down my throat while they're in the shower. How does this shampoo feel in my hand? And the purpose of this is to really plant yourself in the moment. And this can be very beneficial too, because they say that stress or anxiety is usually caused by thinking about the future. Depression is usually caused by thinking about the past. So if you're really grounded and present in this moment in time, you should be okay. You shouldn't be anxious or depressed. So meditation, mindfulness especially, really plants us in the moment. Usually when I'm doing it with clients and talking to them about grounding exercises, such as the one I just talked you through of the 5 different senses going through, it's to pull them out of that emotional mind. So a lot of times we know tools that we can utilize, but when we're caught up in our emotions, it's hard to even think through what our tools are. So a grounding exercise pulls us from that emotional mind into the present, and then that next step would be doing something to help us. So whether it's a tool you already know, whether it's accessing a positive affirmation, whether it's doing some self-hypnosis from there, doing some imagery of something going well, that would be right before using that tool. If you need that pull down first so that you can utilize a tool, that's where mindfulness, meditation, and grounding exercises would come in. So I hope that answered your question, Etta. Okay. So I talked through the grounding exercise, but going into a little bit more tools, another grounding exercise, which I didn't mention before, is an objective question. So one that has a concrete answer. And again, that's to pull us out of that emotional element and ground us in reality. So when I was in social work, I worked with kids with mental and behavioral health issues. And a lot of times they got caught up in emotions, which is not just because they're kids, because we all, as adults and all different ages and different groups, really can get caught up in the emotional. But we used to ask them an objective question, something that had a very concrete answer. What time is it? What's 5 plus 5? What do red and blue make? This pulls you out of the emotional mind, because you can't really be thinking about emotion if you're in the logical part of your mind. So a grounding exercise is a great thing for you guys to utilize when you're caught up in that emotional element. The positive affirmations, I talked through this a little bit before too. Direct reversals using first person, present tense, and that positive languaging of what you do want, not what you don't want. And then the next one I have here is cancel, cancel, reverse. So this is, again, using that reversal, but it kind of also pulls in a little bit of the grounding first. By saying to yourself, cancel, cancel, you're kind of canceling out that negative, and then you're putting in the reversal. So let's say, as John had said in his example before, you're walking into a situation or you're having some kind of stressful situation that's causing your self-esteem to lower. So you'd say whatever thought comes into your mind, you're cancel, cancel, and then you reverse. So cancel, cancel, I've got this. Cancel, cancel, I can do this. I am doing this. I'm on top of this. Okay. All right, so that was kind of everything I had written out here. We talked through how the mind works, and knowing that, what you can do to start to utilize tools to make changes to help yourself deal with stress. So I open it up to questions now. Any question about anything I spoke about or anything I didn't cover either?
Tracy, this is Sally. We're listening and making copious notes. Thank you so much for everything you shared with us. But many of the people in here work with adults or anyone with some disabilities. They work in the mental health space. And day after day, time after time, they're confronted with situations they may not even be able to solve, right? Sometimes they do offer some solutions or can mitigate issues, but most of the time it's almost a feeling of like helplessness. How could you use that as an example in terms of how you would deal with that when you go home at night and recognize that you're just not having the impact you'd like to be able to have, particularly since we have so many nonprofit leaders on the call today?
Yes, yeah. So there are a few different layers to this, but for sure, one thing, if you want to do that just positive reversal, especially when it's something that to you can't change necessarily. So this hopelessness usually leads to a feeling of that it can't change. But there are small things, as I'm sure you all see along the way, that makes you feel like you're doing some kind of impact. So maybe tying that together. So because I'm making small changes, I am hopeful. So connecting it to something you do believe can help you to believe that second part of I am hopeful. The second thing about this too is reinforcing with the positive. So calling forward situations when you did make an impact, because not every day is hopeless. Otherwise you wouldn't stay in this field of helping people. Or maybe there's another reason, but most of the time there are times that are hopeful. So something that you can do is using an anchor. So an anchor is something that connects us to a time or an emotion. So a time usually that brings up an emotion is the best. So remember, everybody think about now a time when you felt you really made an impact. Maybe it was early in your career, maybe it was later in your career, maybe it was yesterday, maybe it was today, maybe it was last week. But think of a time in your life or in your work where you really felt you made an impact. And then when you're really feeling that strongly, I want you to step into that memory, see what you see, hear what you hear, maybe close your eyes so you can really see it and really get into that experiencing of it. See what you see, hear what you hear, and most of all, feel the good feeling of knowing that you're hopeful. And then when you really are feeling that strongly, I want everybody to take their thumb and press into the palm of their other hand. It doesn't matter which hand you're using, but take one thumb and press into the palm of their other hand. And you're anchoring in that memory. So press firmly into your palm while you're stepping into that memory, and then take a deep breath. So in and out. And take another one. And exhale. And then one more deep breath in. And exhale it out. And then go ahead and let go of the palm of your hand and step out of that memory and let it go for a moment and come back to this moment. Open your eyes. And then I want you to step back into that memory. So we're going to reinforce it one more time. Step back into that memory, close down your eyes, see what you see, hear what you hear, and feel that good feeling again. And when you're really feeling it strongly, I want you to press in again into the palm of your hand and take 3 deep breaths again. In and out. In and out. And one more deep breath in. And go ahead and exhale. And then go ahead and let go of your palm, and you can let go of that memory now. And now go ahead and test it. So not stepping into that memory consciously or anything, go ahead and press into your palm, and that feeling should return because we've reinforced it twice. So that's an anchor now. So now anytime you're feeling that hopelessness maybe, you can go ahead and press in on that anchor and that feeling should return. And you can do this with a lot of different things. Sometimes I'll anchor success memories with people who are trying to achieve a goal so that they remember that feeling of success and bring it into what they're doing. I've even done procrastination ones. So something that you would procrastinate often, a lot of people say laundry, but it could be other things. And then doing that when you're trying to stop a behavior can be helpful too. But usually I do anchor in feelings of hopefulness, feelings of confidence, feelings of being loved or safe. So this can be something that you can utilize. So hopefully that helped you guys, and that's another tool that you can use. But again, remember you can do reversals as well, saying I am hopeful. And if you're feeling a hard time with that, connecting it to something you do believe. So because I know I work hard, I am hopeful. Because I know I make a difference, I am hopeful. Connecting it to something you already believe helps you to believe that second part. Any other questions?
Tracy, that was great. Thank you. That was very helpful, and the exercise was great. I did want to say, I heard someone once mention to me that you should keep a warm and fuzzy file. Sometimes someone sends you a note, or so in case you have forgotten that happy memory that you want to bring back out, you kind of look in your file periodically and remember, oh, that's right, someone acknowledged something I did, or made some reference to some success. Have you ever had your own warm and fuzzy file?
No, so I haven't heard that before, but I really do like that. And you can also do that in your mind as well. So keeping a file of different things. And that's another thing that we do in hypnosis. The mind does file things. So this is more actually something called neuro-linguistic programming, which goes hand in hand a lot with hypnosis. But let's say like when we do a trauma reversal, we're usually refiling negative memories along with positive ones. So I find that very interesting, keeping a warm, fuzzy file, like you said, on paper, because that's how your mind stores things too. It stores things usually emotionally. So different events get filed together that didn't take place together, but are grouped according to something about you. So whether it helps to reinforce a belief or it creates certain emotions. So even if you physically file things together, like you're talking about, it might help you also to refile and to reinforce that feeling in your mind as well. So I just had something from Barbara here that she just emailed me a really cool picture. Let's see if I can pull that up. And does anyone else have a question? Well, so I didn't get that yet, Barbara, but if I get it, are you comfortable with me sharing it? Do you want me to share it here, or?
We have one more from here, Tracy.
Okay, go ahead.
I heard you speak once before too, and a lot of times I don't come back to hear people a second time, but I really enjoyed you, so I wanted to hear you again.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. So two things. First, I would like to share that I do practice mindfulness-based meditation. I've taken courses a couple of times. And what you said as far as it being different from just clearing, it's true, because really what a lot of it is it's a practice that you're constantly like catching yourself go off into other areas. And one of the things that I find during the mindfulness-based type practice is things I've completely forgotten about that, I need to do. It's like, oh yeah, I've got to do this. I'm going to add that to my calendar. They come up like that. I don't really think I get an experience of, let's say, the creative spark, so to speak, as much as I get when I was exercising a lot before I hurt myself. That was really inspiring in nature. But definitely there are things that are kind of like stored subconsciously that you can also see during a mindfulness-based practice. And sometimes I'll get in touch, oh, gee, I didn't realize that hurt. Oh, I didn't realize that was stiff. So, and they're all different kinds of mindfulness-based practices. There's one thing I did want to ask you about in particular, and that has to do with what you said about the subconscious. And, that's because there seems to be, some concern that I've read about that when, during hypnosis or, certain kinds of regression, people will, quote, remember that certain events took place. And my question and concern about that is if the subconscious doesn't really distinguish between, let's say, dreams and fantasy and reality and actual memories, how do you know if somebody is actually so-called recalling something that it's something that actually occurred?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. Before I answer that, though, I wanted to come back to what you said about mindfulness and things coming to you, and that was such a great point. And oftentimes, when you are clearing your mind, the conscious mind, and you're able to go into subconscious, things will come to you, both that you want to just be aware of, but people will recall where they left something that they lost, or different things that can just come out because we're not filtering it. So remember, the critical factor is filtering just what's relevant to us, or what it thinks is relevant. So when that critical factor is removed and we're in the subconscious mind, things can come to us that aren't filtered. And I always tell people, then it's up to you to decide what you want to do with that. We're just gathering information now, and then you can decide what to do with that. So that was a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. And then to your question about memory surfacing. So yes, I'm very careful with people when we recall memory. When we do any type of regression work, it's always to look at things therapeutically. So when people call me and say, oh, I want to know if I was abused, believe it or not, I do get people calling for that. I say, I don't do that work. If you have an issue now that you think is because of abuse, we can work on that issue. And if something comes out, that's fine. But memories are very untrustworthy, just like eyewitness testimony is untrustworthy, because our mind is storing it, and then each time we're recalling it, we're recalling the last memory we had of it. So in my work, we're just looking at it to see what's relevant. So maybe we'd go back and say, follow this emotion back to the first time you felt that emotion. And it might be a very clear, vivid memory to you, and maybe it was that vivid memory, but maybe it was a compilation of a few memories that had to do with that. And for therapeutic purposes, it doesn't really matter, because we're looking at in order to feel something or change the way we feel about something or identify a belief that came out of it, etc. There are some police stations, especially overseas, that will use hypnotherapists in order to recall eyewitness testimony. And there's a lot of controversy about that because of this issue, because memories can be false. So definitely don't always think that because a memory came out that it was a specific real memory, but it usually is a memory of something. So maybe it was a memory that came out of how you felt in that moment, and it wasn't what actually happened, but it's how what happened made you feel. So whenever things come to you, there's a reason. Your mind and body are sending you messages. The same way when we get butterflies in our stomach, that's our body trying to give us a message. And the more we can receive that message, the more it will stop trying to send it. I always try to think of the mind as like that little kid, you know, when you're on the phone with somebody and you tell your kids, like, just be quiet, wait a moment, and they keep tapping you and say, mommy, I want to show you something, And you're like, just a minute, and they keep tapping and tapping, and finally you're like, what is it? And then they just show you like a picture they made and they go away. So they just want to deliver that message. And your body's the same way. The more you ignore the messages that your body is trying to send you, the more it's going to find a way to hit you over the head with it. This is very common with stress. So you try to suppress that stress or ignore that stress, and you feel it in different ways. It comes out physically for a lot of people. And if you just take in the message and say, okay, I'm stressed, my body needs me to feel more protected, or I need to take some time for self-care, receive that message, your body is going to stop giving you that message so many times. For me, this was very important. I was in social work, and I had a handle on everything, of course. But I had a lot of anxiety, and I was ignoring my anxiety because I had to deal with things, you know, and deal with life, not just my work, but real life. And my anxiety found a way to physically stop me. First, I got panic attacks where I couldn't move or do things, and I still wouldn't slow down. So then I actually had to go to the hospital. They thought I had symptoms of MS and thought I had MS, but it was all physical manifestations of anxiety. And this was my body telling me to slow down. I didn't listen the first time. I didn't listen with the panic attacks. And so finally I had to listen when I started to get loss of sensation in one side of my body, loss of vision. And eventually I slowed down and I switched out of social work, which I loved social work and I loved helping people. Now I help people who more want to be helped, and it's a little easier. But because I received that message, I stopped having all those physical manifestations of anxiety. So that's a good example of having to receive that message. And I know I got off track and your question was about memories, but I hope that answered your question. I have another one here I see from John, that your career coach has you write things down that you feel positive about and your great accomplishments, and refer to it whenever doubt comes about. That's a great thing to do. That's very similar to what we were talking about before with that warm fuzzy file, you know, because that's going to reinforce the positives. So it's still a bit of the conscious mind coming in and rationalizing it, but you can also reinforce it in the subconscious by when you're writing things down and you're feeling positive about these things, to create, if there's certain things that come out that you have a harder time believing in those stressful times, make that into an affirmation and repeat that to yourself daily. I'll have people who keep their positive affirmations on an index card, and they keep it in their car, and every time they're at a red light, they'll read through them. So they're reinforcing those over and over, because it's great to reinforce everything positive, but it's more important to reinforce the things that you have a hard time believing when you need it more. Any other questions? Any other?
First of all, thank you.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks so much for sharing about how powerful anxiety can actually be. But my question is this: the technique that you mentioned with clear, cancel, I had heard that, like someone else had suggested that. I find that doesn't work for me. Is there anything? It's like, no way, I'm not canceling that. Or if I try, it's like it comes back in another form, like you were talking about, you know, where you don't want, where it won't let you ignore it, so to speak. And sometimes I find that, you know, as you found, is that concerns, I may think it's about A, and then I start looking into A, and I find out, oh wow, B, C, and D need to be dealt with, and it really was a legitimate concern, and I didn't even know why I was having that feeling. But that's a little bit off on a tangent, but do you have any other suggestion instead of like cancel, any other way to manage negative thought?
Right. So the cancel reverse is really to help in the moment. You still have to deal with it later. But as you said, you might be canceling one thing and it might be about BCD, like you said. So as you become aware of it, creating affirmations that are about the real issue is going to help to start to change that programming. And it does take reinforcement. So it's not overnight. The repetition part is important. Unless you're doing it in meditation, in hypnosis, you're able to access your subconscious mind. That's going to help it quicker, but you still have to keep reinforcing it. So the cancel reverse can help in the moment, but you also have to pull it forward into the other things. And then also being aware of that beliefs, like you're saying, you're becoming more aware as you work on one thing that other things need to happen first. That's where we talked about earlier, that the awareness really helps you, because that awareness can help pull into, all right, well, now I want to do something about it. So creating reinforcements to help you believe those things, because remember, the mind is only letting through, the critical factor is only letting into the subconscious mind what is going to reinforce these things. So with the repetition, we're putting that in, hopefully, you're doing enough repetition, but then you're creating things to reinforce that. So that warm fuzzy file, the writing down the things, the anchoring that we just talked about will help to then keep reinforcing it. And it is more difficult, especially in the beginning, to believe a lot of what you're telling yourself. So even if you feel like you're lying to yourself, I would tell you to stick with it, but maybe change the languaging to something not as intense, something to help you believe it. Give yourself that step I was talking about, like the everyday more and more. Every day more and more, I am confident. I have a lot of people who have a hard time saying I'm relaxed because they have a negative connotation with the word relax. Like, I can't relax. So they'll use something like, I'm at peace, I'm calm. Something as simple as changing to a synonym can really help you to believe it more. Does that help?
Just whatever word I find works for me rather than reactivates it. Thank you.
Finding a word that helps you and then keeping at it, because, you know, it doesn't happen overnight. There are ways to do it quicker, but especially with the repetition, it does take time and consistency. But if there is something going on, like you said, it might be something else. So looking at what that other thing is. Go ahead. There was another question or another thought?
No, Tracy, it's Sally. It's Sally. I was just going to ask if you had any more questions at your end before we close up, that's all.
No, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but this was a great option, and all my contact info is on this PowerPoint, so feel free to reach out to me, whether something occurs to you tomorrow or next week or even next year, or if you just didn't get a chance to ask your question or you'd rather do it offline, feel free to reach out, give me a call. My office is right in Somerville. So, I don't know how far all of you are. I do some sessions via Skype. There's a lot of studies coming out now, actually, that webinar Skype can be more effective for a lot of people. I still find in-person's great too, though. So I welcome you all to reach out to me, whether it's just a question or anything else. So thank you so much.
Well, at least we had a lot less anxiety and stress knowing that our webinar worked. So thank you for being so flexible and helping us all. I think everyone on this call and here in the room thoroughly enjoyed and really learned a great deal about the way that our mind works and the way that we can change our mind. I think that for me personally, one of the most important things you said was that our memories may not be correct, but what we believe is always true. And I think I have that conversation with my daughter periodically, who doesn't always believe what I believe, and I'm so adamant that I'm right, and of course she's adamant that she's right. So a lot of what you said works in so many different places in addition to our professional roles. I do want to remind everyone that on February 13th next week, we have put in an additional webinar. We usually have one a quarter, but with the Tax Act being so impactful on the nonprofit community, we have a discussion we're going to have here by webinar as well, or in our office, weather permitting. And you should have all seen the invitation. I just want to remind everyone it's going to be not only on how the Tax Act is written to impact nonprofits, but also what nonprofit organizations can do in response to that, which I think is probably as important as knowing what the Act is knowing how it can influence you and what you can do to change that. On March 13th, next month, we have our quarterly nonprofit CEO roundtable, and I'm hoping that again, the weather will be good. We've never really worried about that before, but now Tracy has new things to worry about, and we are hopeful that by March will be good and people will join us, as always, at our nonprofit CEO roundtable. So this has been just wonderful. I think we have your permission to put the PowerPoint up on our website under our resources.
Yes, feel free to do that. And I know you guys said you usually record these as well, so feel free to look back at it, I guess.
Great, thank you. And I'll be tweeting about it, so I hope everyone's following SobelCo on Twitter, and also we'll be putting some things on our blog, because so many of the things you talked about were so important and relevant for all of us. So we'll be using social media to get that word out and talk about Tracy Blank a little. So thank you again for being here and for helping us, and everyone on the call, I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day and drive safely. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.